the text tells us that when God looks down upon the earth and he sees the rainbow, which I'm pretty certain is every day, is somewhere on this earth, he remembers his promise to humankind to never destroy us. So this is the story of Noah and God, this very long relationship that they had. Of course, Noah's relationship with God continues on as long as he is alive. But we get to see some very interesting, specific things about God that tell us many things about him. So what do you think of that story? I think it's an amazing story. It has all kinds of fantastic things involved in it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, there's probably 50 threads we could pull upon for this story. I mean, we don't have the time to do that. There was a few things as you were reading that really stood out to me. Probably the biggest thing that the idea that Noah's not perfect, right? The idea that Noah just wanted to walk with God, right? And that seems very attainable, right? So if you take these stories and say, what does this mean to me right here, right now? It's like, man, just the desire to walk with God. Like that's all God's looking for. You look through all the heroes of these stories we're going through, Noah, and we'll continue on through the course of the series. It's not like these are men they're not Christ. They're not Jesus. They're not blameless. They're not sinless. They just have a desire to be with their creator. And that feels attainable to me, right? Like that doesn't feel too lofty for me, that I like how approachable that is. Now you couple that with, it seems like if you have that, what's God do? He asks Noah to build this. Like, what do you think Noah's reaction was when he's like, I want you to build this thing, and he sees these dimensions? He's like, what? Like, there's no way. He's like, oh, no problem, right? And I often feel, I mean, this may be a little Sunday schooly, but I often feel that in my life. Like, all of a sudden, you're walking with God, you're doing this thing, and then you feel like you're supposed to do this thing that's like, what? Like, what's going on here? Why? This doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't understand this. And I think that the story reaffirms to me, like, when you are a tree in the forest doesn't make any sense. But that's where faith has to come in and just remind you of this ginormous story that Noah was a part of. And guess what? You and I are a part of the same story today. It's still progressing. So I love the other thing that I love about this process, again, is just being reminded of all the details and the nuance of these things. And some are very easy to understand. Some of these things are very confusing. But then what do? We talk about them. We pray to God about these things. And I think the ultimate purpose of anything we do is the enrichment of our relationship with God. And all of these stories do that. And that's just a beautiful thing.
Well, you just said a mouthful there, Jeremiah. Well, let's unpack what you just said, which is when you talk about, first of all, what is memorable. What stands out to you is that it's this one man who God credits as righteous, right? And we've talked about righteousness, that he's righteous in the eyes of God, not in his own eyes, but in the eyes of God. And I guess because he is one man walking with God, in that way we can relate to him, right? Like we understand that we are in the same situation as Noah. We're walking with God. We want to be considered to be righteous in the eyes of God. And we feel like that's important, right? There's something about it that we highly value.
It's very relatable. One way,
yeah, it's very relatable because
you look at
we
some
don't
of the
know
other
that we're doing it perfectly. We're not sure we're doing it perfectly or even all that well some of the time, but we're trying.
And you look at some of the other heroes of the Bible, of a Paul or a Nehemiah or these other folks are like, dude, I can't do that. Like, what? These people are just wild. Like, I am not built that way. I can't do that. Noah, I understand that there's the mechanical ability in the ark, but just a guy that wants to be with God, that will kind of do the next step. Like, I can do that. Like, that sounds reasonable, and that little piece is what saved the world, right? Would cause God to be like, no, I'm going to keep going with this plan.
Yeah, I'm going to give it another shot, if you will. But Noah, we don't really know what his skills are. We can be sure that in that age and time, you had to have skills of a certain sort in order to live and get by. And he had a family. He had sons, so he had help. There isn't any indication that when it comes to building the ark, that he had additional help. Like there's no indication that, the community all came together and said, hey, Noah, what are you doing? We want to help you. Instead, we get this visual of one man and his sons gathering all this material and then laying it out and trying to put it all together. And not even exactly knowing what was going to happen. Like his amount of faith that what God told him was going to happen is monumental. I mean, it's huge.
Absolutely. Well, I think so oftentimes, like whether I'm talking to my wife or my sons, or like, what do we do next? I'm like, I don't know, but I know it's just about making the next right move.